Hello and welcome to the Checking the Gate podcast. I am your host, Doug, and here we have with us my good buddy, Mr. Grinning here. He's playing it so coy, ladies and gentlemen.
I think the word is cool.
Cool, coy.
Cool.
So yeah.
Hi.
We have Paul here.
Yeah, you do.
Welcome back to the show.
It's good to be back.
It's been a while.
It has been.
I've recorded a whole archive of episodes to work through, but I've missed you.
I have missed you too.
I mean, we've been intending to talk about this movie for quite a while. The problem is, ladies and gentlemen, is that when we hang out, it's hard to get down to business because the pleasure.
It is not. We're professional.
The
okay?
pleasure's too pleasurable. That's the problem.
Oh, I wanted to congratulate you on being on the Sci-Fi Movie Podcast. I really enjoyed that episode.
Yeah, I had another one that just aired. It was released. Well, as of when we're recording, I don't know when this will be released exactly, but it was just aired yesterday. So we did a second episode on Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace.
Oh, I can't wait.
Yeah, it's gonna be.
That's gonna be fun.
It's gonna be a fun one. I liked recording it, but I really enjoyed the Men in Black podcast. That was a lot of fun.
And you know what? I'm gonna have to say, just just in case they're listening, because they are. I just want to say that I agree with you. When it came to Vincent D'Onofrio's performance in the movie.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I very much enjoyed his performance, and I felt it added a neat layer to him. Like, he really did feel like a gigantic bug stuck in this little body, even though that doesn't make sense.
No, like, the laws of physics are you have to suspend the disbelief there, yeah.
I really enjoyed that podcast. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, if any of you are like, what are they talking about? You can check out the Sci-Fi Movie Podcast at the sci-fi-moviepodcast.com.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, they're on Facebook and Twitter and all the...
They're veterans, hey? How long have they been at it?
A few years, I think.
Yeah.
So they've been podcasting for a while. I started as a fan of the show. I just listened to it, and then one day I was like, hey, I've been podcasting too. Why don't I just join in? And so it was simple as messaging them, asking if I could be part of it.
Oh, so you approached them?
Yeah, I was like, hey, can I be on an episode? And they're like, yes.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's just sometimes it just doesn't hurt to ask.
Yeah.
Like just kind of take the reins. And
when you look up to people, like, usually it seems like you go into it and you sort of have that, like, student teacher mentality,
mm-hmm.
right? And I felt like in that particular podcast, you jumped right in and you held your own with these guys who you've been listening to for quite some time. Mm-hmm. And you just sort of jumped in there and you didn't feel out of place or anything like that. I felt like you were as large in the picture as they were.
Well,
and it was their show too, right? So there's that also that, like, it's their territory type thing. But you just you jumped in and you kicked ass.
Well, thank you. I'm glad it felt like I did all right. I know that sometimes, like, when I'm listening to the podcast, I want to talk and contribute, but it's like, I can't. This was recorded like a year ago. So it was nice to actually to be listening to them talk. I'm like, oh wait, I can contribute. I'm actually in this podcast.
Yeah.
So it's sort of a surreal transition of being a passive listener to an active contributor.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully I'll get to do more episodes of that. I've got 2 now. So, and I feel like I do all right. I hold my own.
Mm-hmm. I really enjoyed your Toy Story podcast with Lehman.
Oh yeah, okay. Yeah. I'm glad you listened to that one.
When I listened to that one too, I wanted to contribute to that conversation because Toy Story was such a huge film, a part of my growing up too.
Yeah. It's just I've seen that one countless times. And I really want to get for the sake of variation an animated feature on this show because it seemed like we were covering a lot of just a lot of live action, a lot more adult content,
and that's where this podcast is.
Yeah. Oh,
today's podcast is live action. So, Dredd, not the Sylvester Stallone. I am the law. No, wait, that was a bad impression.
Hey guys, I'm the law. Yeah, not that Dredd. Not Judge Dredd.
Which
but
was
just Dredd.
Masterpiece.
The Judge Dredd?
Yeah.
Yeah, oh yeah. It was a huge Oscar contender in 1995. I don't even know if that was what it was from.
I want to say 95.
Yeah, 1995. 20 years ago.
Holy cow. If I didn't feel old before, I do now.
I haven't seen it. Is it?
Oh, you haven't seen it?
I haven't seen Judge Dredd. I hear it's not great.
It's... I hear it's not great.
That's to summarize.
It's a classic. It's part of that era of 90s action films that I think we all remember. It's hard to articulate it because I was, a teenager at the time and, I'm not as good with words as you, but there's just something about 90s action films that have a special place in my heart.
Yeah, I think that there was something very unapologetic about them.
Bear in mind, I was also like a kid at the time too, so
Yeah.
like my hormones were just crazy. And in those movies, like I was allowed to watch as a kid, and then you'd see like boobies on the screen or whatever, and I was like, "Oh my god, this is the greatest movie ever!"
I remember
That made movies awesome, like boobs. Pause it, like, oh my god.
I remember National Lampoon's European Vacation. I watched it at my grandma's house. I think she had forgotten that there were boobs in it, and so like she put it on, and there was this a really awkward moment of like, and I was like, and in my head I was like, you're allowed to show boobs in movies? Like you can do that? That's amazing.
And now it's on TV.
Yeah, now now
Game
it's
of
just.
Thrones and...
But that's neither here nor there because because we're not talking.
Well,
about
there's a scene in Judge Dredd where like he's like, oh no, that's a different one. That's Demolition Man. I'm thinking of two different movies.
Was Demolition Man Stallone as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
And Wesley Snipes.
But today we're talking about the 2012 Dredd.
Only one thing fighting for order in the chaos. This is Judge Dredd.
Peachtree's is the manufacturing base for all the Slowmo in Mega City 1.
Makes the brain feel as if time is passing at 1% its normal speed. You know how often we get a judge up in Peachtree's?
Well, you got one now.
Somewhere in this block are 2 judges.
Rookie, you ready?
I want him dead.
We're gonna have to go through him.
If we play this right, we can take the whole city.
I know. Judgment time.
Let's finish this.
The sentence is death.
Okay, so Dredd.
Yeah, it's based off of a comic book.
Is it? I know that.
It's. I was gonna say is. I'm surprised you didn't know, but maybe you did, and you're just yanking my willy, just giving it a good old yank.
That's after the party tonight.
Okay, sorry.
This is a family show, damn it.
Yeah. iTunes hasn't labeled us as explicit yet, so.
Well, now we're gonna have to.
Yeah, the original Judge Dredd comic. I think it goes back as far as 1977.
Yeah.
So I didn't know that. I thought he was spawned from the 90s, but apparently no. He's got a lot of history from the 2000 AD comics. So yeah, that's what the year 2000 looks like, ladies and gentlemen.
Hey.
Yeah, sort of this is sort of a comic that was kind of on the fringes of comics for a long time because in the 70s there was a lot of superhero stuff. Right?
Yeah.
And so this was something that was kind of just a little bit outside of the popular comic radar.
Yeah, kind of like
being
a cult comic book.
Cult comic book, yeah. And it was like, as a result, it was darker, grittier, more adult-oriented. And as such, the films are not too much of a departure. They're more adult films.
Although the first one, I would say, is a departure from the comic book.
Probably.
People were mad.
Even just because you saw Judge Dredd's face.
Yeah, that was a huge one. That's actually something I'm pretty sure Karl Urban said in an interview, that they're trying to stay true to the source material, and they pay homage to the source material in many ways. You know, there's like a helmet in like on Mama's wall with a gold chain around it, which is like in the comic books their badge is hung off of a gold chain.
Okay, yeah.
So that's like a hat tip to the comic book itself. And Karl Urban himself said that, you know, we're like, I'm not taking my helmet off because you never see Dredd's face.
So yeah, let's talk a little bit about the story of Dredd. So basically, it takes place in the future.
It begins in a dark night, where a dark man waits, with a dark purpose.
Sounds legit.
Yep. Name that movie. Come on. It begins in a dark night.
Oh, this does ring a bell.
I can see you're only interested in the exceptionally rare. I think then, my friend, you'll be most rewarded to consider beasts. This is no ordinary lamp.
Oh, it's Aladdin.
Yeah.
I was like, this sounds so familiar.
No, it does not, in fact, begin on a dark night.
No, actually. Okay, so it just says a dystopian future. No year specifically. It all takes place in a mega city in which the city blocks are more like giant buildings rather than
like gigantic buildings.
Unfortunately, due to overpopulation, the justice system has sort of had to go get sped up a little bit, and so essentially police are called judges, and they try and maintain some semblance of justice in a way overpopulated giant city.
Yeah, that's rampant with like poverty and just social economic conditions that crime can thrive in. Yeah, I would not wish that future on the human race. No. And outside the walls of the city, it's an irradiated wasteland. And because of like the nuclear war, which basically crushed the world, resources are sparse, but inside the mega city you at least have a chance. But the closer you are to the walls, the greater the risk of being irradiated. And then that's where you get like the mutants and stuff like that.
So there's a particular mutant who...
Or genetic birth defects and stuff like that too. But yeah, mutants.
Yeah. So Judge Dredd is training a particular mutant who's named Anderson. Her mutation specifically is that she can read minds. She is a psychic. So otherwise she looks great. Yeah.
She doesn't have like an arm sticking out of her head or anything like that.
Which is, which is a plus. And so he's taking her on a training mission, and they go to a seldom visited block called Peach Trees.
I'm just going to comment right now on her character. I think it's interesting that the movie is called Dredd, and it's about him, but she's got the better arc.
Yeah, actually, it's a sort of...
It's like
is
her
kind of
film.
Her movie, yeah. It's kind of like Mad Max Fury Road, where it's called Mad Max, but she's more of a bystander in a movie about
Furiosa.
Yeah. So that's interesting. But, not to say that Dredd is not an important character. He is.
Oh, he's the character.
But it isn't his story as much.
Yeah. He's already established in the lore.
There is sort of this like legendary tone when they talk about Judge Dredd, like, okay, we know who this guy is. We're charging this much money if you want to get rid of him. Yeah.
Or there's like there's a moment when in the film, once again, spoiler alert. Okay, if you're gonna listen to these, there's gonna be spoilers.
We always recommend for the Checking the Gate podcast, because we were trying to like dig deeper and talk about the content of the film. It's better to watch it beforehand.
Yeah.
We'll try and not like reveal anything too like that will ruin it, but like Dredd is on Netflix, so there you go. If you want, you can pause now, watch it for an hour and a half on Netflix, and then come back.
Although I would recommend, I saw it in theaters in 3D. I wasn't expecting much, but I was blown away by it. And then I picked it up in 3D on Blu-ray, and like I haven't really been too impressed with the 3D films that have come out on Blu-ray. I mean, they're passable. They're nowhere near what it's like in the theater. That being said, I'd say as a 3D movie, it's probably the best in my collection. So like the 3D effects are really, really well done. What I'm getting at is, if you're going to watch it, try watching it in 3D. It's a lot of fun. If not, it's great. It's great on its own. There's a moment in Dredd when he resolves himself to do the thing that he's there to do. He's responding to a call, basically, and he's trying to solve this crime that happened at the beginning of the film. The gloves have officially come off, and he addresses everyone in Peach Trees, and it's this huge, enormous apartment complex. And he's like, "Peach Trees, this is Judge Dredd." And at that moment, they cut to a bunch of people reacting to him saying it's Judge Dredd, because if it's a judge, that's bad news, but if it's Dredd, shit.
It's going down, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, and it's like, I love moments like that. He's got, like you said, this legendary status, so he doesn't really need the arc. Although he does have an arc. But,
yeah, he does.
Anderson's is a lot more interesting.
But back to the, let's finish up the plot synopsis. The Peach Trees is a distribution hub for a drug called Slowmo, which is going rampant in the streets. And the crime lord of that particular block goes by Mama, and she executes 3 people who why did she kill them again?
Okay, so essentially what happened, her story is that she started as a hooker. She was working for the guy in Peach Trees, and there's 4 different levels, I believe 4 different levels of this is like a 200 story tower. Mm-hmm. The first level is like a gang called the Judged, and they have a treaty with the gang above them that they won't sell on their turf. And then The other gang is called something else, and then there's another gang, and then there's another gang. The one on the very top is the gang that Mama worked for as a hooker, until the leader of that gang cut up her face, and then she dismembered him with her teeth. Use your imagination, folks. And then killed the guy, took over the gang, and then proceeded to slaughter all the other gangs. And they got to keep their colors, and they got to keep their contacts and everything, so long as they only sold on levels that were, they sold drugs and paraphernalia on their territory and their turf, and not go into another person's turf. So these 3 people were selling in the wrong turf. And then they took them to Mama, and Mama was like, kill them. Skin him, give him some slow-mo first, and then toss him off the top of the building. And then you see this like huge slow motion, cool 3D effect of them falling, and then splat.
So those 3 homicides are what Judge Dredd and Anderson are responding to, and they begin to unravel the sinister plot of Mama.
But they stumble upon it because it's just a triple homicide, right?
Yeah, no biggie.
Yeah, no biggie.
Yeah.
And then through the process of trying to figure out if this one person that they've captured is guilty of murder, because as Judge Dredd says, even though you see him waste like 5 guys at the beginning of the film, because he's judge, jury, and executioner, the psychic Anderson, she reads this one dude's mind who they believe is like responsible for killing these 3, and she's 99% sure, and Judge Dredd is like, no, we can't be 99% sure and then execute the guy. We have to be 100% sure. So he's got this like code, and then they go on this like fact-finding mission, and then they stumble upon this greater plot, and that is the distribution of Slowmo, which is infecting the city. And then Mama and her gang decide, we're gonna take out the judges, Anderson and Dredd.
And then it becomes personal. Well, no, it's more of a battle for survival than anything else.
Yeah, but it's done so in a really, really cool way. Because the whole building just like goes into lockdown mode.
And then they're not able to call for backup.
Yeah, you call for backup.
I guess I don't know, Paul. What do you think? What do you think is the deeper? I don't know. If we had to dig sort of deeper into the layers of this movie, what do you think is the deeper thing going on in the story?
That's a good question. I'm not really sure.
Because I think that this film, some people could easily dismiss it as a very like shallow splatterfest action movie, but I think that like. Looking at it, it seems actually surprisingly deep. I think that there's actually a lot of interesting things going on.
Well, let's consider first off the overall like tone of the world.
If I were to let's launch a bit of a conversation on it. One of the things that I find fascinating is the idea of the judge system. I think in some sense this is almost a critique of the modern justice system and like how horrifically slow it is sometimes to like see any results whatsoever. And I guess this also like it does extend to the comics, but I think it's an interesting portrait of a world where the population is so overpopulated and so condensed that the justice system as we have it in our world today would not work.
Yeah, it's completely inadequate.
It isn't necessarily presenting this judge option as like a really viable option, but it's sort of like, look at what it may have to come to someday.
Yeah,
it's sort of like an express lane justice where somebody is qualified to be the judge, the jury, and the executioner,
which Dredd is completely. He's also a workaholic. He never even really like opens up to Anderson. They have a relationship. I will teach you the ways, and he gets her feet wet really quick too. Like, make the call. And it's hilarious too, because I think that's like one of like her first judgments. There's a homeless guy sitting in a doorway for this massive door.
Yes.
And Anderson makes a judgment and says he's it's illegal to be homeless or whatever, and then he has to spend like a couple weeks in the ISO cubes if he doesn't leave. So Judge Dredd warns him, if you do not leave, you're gonna come with us to the ISO cube.
Right. Yeah. Because homicide comes first. Let's deal with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, there's no crime too small. Yeah. It's like, I'm in the middle of a homicide investigation, but you don't be here when I get back. Then he comes back, he's like, I told you, all right, get up. And they've got their murderer. And then the door comes slamming down on top of the homeless guy.
It's like, well, there you go. I guess that's one way to solve that little problem. I do feel like it's an interesting exploration of justice in this sort of strange dystopian future. But yet I do also feel like in some ways it doesn't necessarily embrace it, because you do sort of see this brief, very small story of this woman who's like, just get out of here, and the less chance you have of the people finding you, the less chance you'll have to kill them. And it shows like her husband was in fact already killed by the judges, and she just didn't know it. And so I feel like in some ways this film was really smart in showing like these are also the consequences of this really bad express lane quote unquote justice system of like you're basically not giving people a chance to show like
the motivation
their motivation, the different layers of why they might be doing what they're doing. And in this case, this guy's family is paying the price for what was essentially in that world legal judgment.
And, like, it's Anderson herself who has to ghost the guy.
Yeah.
Because, like, there's, I think, 13 guys, and they've got the judges pinned, or so they think. And then the judge gives them to the count of 10. You have to the count of 10. You're threatening a judge. You're all armed illegally, and threatening a judge and shooting at a judge is punishable by death. He lets them know, and they're all doing what they can for Mama, because, obviously, in this situation, they think she's going to win, and if you didn't help, you don't get to reap the benefits. You could be killed for not lending a hand or whatever.
Yeah.
It's implied that there's that relationship that she has with the people of Peachtrees. I want something done, you get it done. And he was out there just doing his business. And he didn't seem like a bad guy. He's just what's the word I'm looking for? He doesn't seem like your typical bad guy.
It seems like he's just kind of almost perhaps due to necessity caught up in the wrong crowd,
Yeah.
It's just like this is how he has to survive. He's a part of a gang. They're going to take care of him and maybe his family. But unfortunately, now they're in a situation where he has to do some dirty work. And the consequence of that just wound up being his life.
Yeah, and there's even like a moment there where he's like looking down the barrel of a gun, and Dredd tells Anderson to make the call. She makes the call, hesitates for a second, and then blows the guy away. It almost seems like she did it so that way she wouldn't fail her test. That's not something that she wanted to do.
Yeah.
But she did it, and then she realizes, maybe there are ways beyond this. But, I mean, in this situation, it's the best that they can do.
It seems like Judge Dredd, he's been at this for so long, and he's so, like, cold and jaded. He's removed from a level of, like, personal morality, and so it's all about justice.
Yeah.
And what is considered justice in that world, because there's so many people and there's so much crime, you can't really have flexibility. Yeah, so it's an interesting tug of war that they're kind of playing with in this film, and it's all very subtle because I mean most of the movie is like action. You
get to see a bit of that tug of war right at the beginning of the film when you were introduced to Anderson. Judge Dredd is standing behind a two-way mirror with his commanding officer. That's when it's revealed that she's indeed psychic, and she's sitting there, and Anderson is asked to tell if like am I standing with somebody, and then she's like, yes, tell me about this man. So she starts digging deeper, and she starts uncovering layers and layers of Dredd, and then she finds something which gives her pause, and then Dredd is like, that's it, that's enough. I believe her. That's one of, to me, the most interesting parts of the film, because you start uncovering, like, okay, well, I know he's a man of honor, and he's a, justice and duty and all that stuff, and then she finds something, and it's like, what is that something?
Yeah, and it never gets answered, so it's sort of like, but it's cool that there's hints at sort of like a deeper layer of Judge Dredd, because he's so stoic and he's so like down to business, and he doesn't leave any level of vulnerability open.
No.
So when someone else opens that up, he's like, nope, cutting this conversation off right here.
It's really interesting, and in the way that they shoot the film, who's the director again?
Pete Travis.
And the director, Pete Travis, and the cinematographer, the way they shot that scene too, it's really interesting, because they do this like slow zoom on Dredd, which even though you can't see his face other than his mouth, and he doesn't move, you can tell he's being affected through the good use of like camera angles and through Karl Urban's acting, and like just overall just how well they put the scene together. You can see that he's actually being affected by what Anderson is uncovering. It's a really, really well shot scene. It really stood out to me.
I also feel like, I guess what is sort of presenting as a solution to this sort of like express lane justice that they have, because obviously the system we have wouldn't work. Their system is a little bit too cold and calculated. I almost feel like Anderson is actually the key behind this whole thing, with her being psychic, and she's able to sort of unlock a lot of the deeper things that are going on beyond people and their motivations.
Yeah.
And so...
especially their motivations, because you can have a guy shooting at a judge, but if another person has a gun to that person's family and tells him you have to shoot at that judge, and that judge goes, no, sorry, the crime is this, you have done this, you're dead. Anderson can see, hold on a second, no, and there's a moment like that in the film. The hacker guy with the eyes.
Mm-hmm, yes, you're right.
Judge Dredd is about to ghost him, and he's like, no, he's a victim. Because if it hadn't been for her, Judge Dredd would have killed him.
So I think that's
So
sort
yeah,
of,
to you're right.
I think that's sort of what this movie's playing at, is that it's Anderson who was completely unqualified, essentially, to be a judge, because she failed all the tests. She was close to pass, but she did fail. But they were giving her a chance because they felt that her psychic abilities would lend so much to the judge system.
Even Dredd says, it's like, she failed. His commanding officer's like, it was marginal. It's like, it wasn't marginal, she failed.
Yeah, again, because like Dredd is so black and white.
Yeah.
It's just like, there's right, there's wrong, there's pass, there's fail, there's executed and spared. Her psychic abilities they are able to show a lot of those like shades of gray that he couldn't see otherwise.
What's interesting too is I'm fairly certain that mutants are an undesirable caste of society.
Yeah, I get that sense as well. Well, because those are like graffiti saying like "no muties here" or something and stuff like that. Like,
and it's the mutants that will end up saving the people who are not beyond redemption. That they're motivated by like self-preservation or help me articulate this, Doug. You're good with words.
Yeah, I think what you're trying to say is the mutants are the outcasts, but potentially the key to finding that sort of balance in that world. So, Paul, what was your favorite aspect of the film?
I've always loved films where you've got a protagonist or an antagonist that are so hyped up in their universe, like they've got legendary status, that you get to see them do what they do best in their environment where they thrive. Like, for instance, in Underworld, Victor, as soon as like they find out that he's on the battlefield, everyone's like, shit, it's Victor. Or RoboCop, RoboCop steps out on the battlefield, everyone's like, shoot at him,
Yeah.
Or Terminator, you've got the Terminator. In Ip Man, it's Ip Man. In Iron Monkey, it's the Iron Monkey. Or Wong Kar-Ying.
Yeah.
When they step onto the battlefield, that completely, just them alone can tip the scale because they're so good at what they do. I love movies like that. And in Dredd, it's Dredd. It's, he's the main character of his comic book that's been around for 50 years. He's the man, so you get to see him in a new age action film that's shot very well. Just kick ass and just do what he does best. That's what draws me to the film itself. Mm-hmm. That's why I, went and saw it in theaters, because I was like, this is going to be awesome.
Yeah, it's interesting that despite the fact that I hadn't seen Judge Dredd, the 95 movie, I never read the comic books. I kind of only... Like, I went to the film kind of like... I kind of knew the Judge Dredd was a thing, but I still got the sense of the fact that Judge Dredd he's a legend in the universe. Mm-hmm.
And right at that moment, your expectations of what was going to happen, like, you just know, like, I wonder in how many ways he's going to kick people's asses.
Mm-hmm. I do appreciate that this film is like, it functions standalone despite the fact that it's part of a bigger franchise. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you also get that sense with Mama as well. Like, although she, as far as I know, she doesn't have any like previous incarnation in any of the comic books or anything like that. You get, just from the description of her character and what she's been through, this sense of like this unobtainable, really grand villain that she's gonna be. And
she's well on her way.
What I also like about it is that it is almost like a video game, in that like they literally go through levels to get to the top, like the top level where Mama's at. So it is almost like she is a big, like she's Bowser.
Donkey Kong.
Yeah, the Donkey Kong or the Bowser of this huge like video game. So there's that sort of that aspect of it where like Judge Dredd and Anderson are the two players, and they go through a bunch of like different boss battles. It's kind of fun that way.
I especially love how the film is resolved, because Mama and Dredd meet. As interesting a character as she is, I just want her to die so badly. Like, you're such a
bad word.
A bad word. Yeah. No, I wasn't going to use that word. Come on, I have class. But yeah, there's that moment, and then Judge Dredd makes the punishment fit the crime.
Yeah, essentially.
And it's such a beautiful moment. I'm just like, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Because she tries to beat him, because like Mama can't compete with him in arsenal or in like physical prowess or firepower or anything like that.
Yeah.
She is really intelligent and has a sort of she has power in different levels. In
Yeah.
that, like, she's foreseen this coming and
She's been preparing.
Yeah. So
Hence
having
the 50
basically
caliber Gatling guns and just like yeah, and she's got her army
an army of like ruled by intimidation and fear
and drug use, and it's like a super villain with all the resources versus that one hero who like rises to the occasion.
You know what's interesting? Like it's almost a difference of like the superhero having the power and the villain having the wits and resources. I guess kind of like Superman versus like
Lex
Luthor.
Luthor,
You know? Yeah, that kind of power play. One of my favorite aspects of this film is I really appreciate that they didn't treat it like it was a brainless action movie. Pete Travis, the director, let it kind of be an art film at times.
Yeah,
Slow-mo,
I love
all
the
the slow-mo
slow-mo.
scenes. It's just like they amped up all the color saturation, and you got to see all these little crazy details in the air, like down to like particles, and
Yeah,
and there's
like-
just this chance to like,
and the music in those moments.
oh yeah, those are great. So suddenly, like, it took a really artistic turn
Mm-hmm.
and became something almost like it was legitimate. You know, like it was embracing the visual aspect of the film medium, and also again, as you mentioned earlier, the fact that it was in 3D, and like this is one of the best 3D movies I think you can go see. Because I'm not a huge fan of 3D typically. Unfortunately, I didn't see it in theaters, but thank you for having me see the 3D Blu-ray. This is actually the only movie I've seen in 3D Blu-ray, and it worked. It actually enhanced the experience of watching it.
Yeah, I was surprised because I have, like I said earlier, I watch 3D films and I'm, it's okay.
Yeah.
It does add a certain layer to the viewing experience, but it becomes more of a hindrance, especially considering I like to snack when I watch my movies. Mm-hmm. And since it has to be nice and dark for the 3D to work properly, I can't see my snacks.
It's a tragedy.
It is a tragedy. I like my popcorn. But Dredd is a movie that I will gladly drop popcorn all over the place for.
I really feel like I wanted to see this in theaters. It wasn't in theaters for a long time because it didn't perform super well.
No, I think they only made like half their budget.
Yeah.
Which is a shame because it's not a bad movie by any stretch of the imagination, but I suppose if you're not into this type of thing, you're not really going to enjoy the hell out of it.
I feel like they kind of dropped the ball on marketing. Like, I don't remember it being marketed particularly well.
I saw the poster and I was in. I was like, Karl Urban? Dredd? Yes.
But the thing is, I think you need to try and sell it beyond... Like, I think there's a comic book audience who's going to be there. Mm-hmm. And they're going to be like, yes, finally, a Dredd film that looks like it's not a Stallone ego trip, you know? I really want to be Judge Dredd.
We love Stallone.
But it is a niche comic book film. It's from like like you said, a cult comic. And there wasn't a movie made about it for like almost 20 years before it. So the character of Judge Dredd wasn't really in the mainstream public mindset. So they need to do something. They need to show off something that would want to draw in a more larger audience if they were going to like actually sell this movie. But unfortunately, they didn't. The budget was $45 million. It wound up making $41.5 million in the box office. I don't know if that was domestic or worldwide.
I think that's worldwide because I saw numbers that said domestically they only made like 15.
Yeah, so unfortunately they did lose money on it.
But what are their sales like in Blu-ray and stuff?
That's a good question.
Because I still purchase my movies, people.
As do I.
It was the number one selling DVD and Blu-ray. 650,000 units sold. I'm just reading these off the top of my head.
Yeah, he's conjuring them up just in his head. It's really amazing stats he can pull up.
Yeah. So they did make a little bit of money.
So yeah, if you $10
million.
million in home media sales is not in North America alone. Not so bad actually. So that it does kind of show that there is an audience for it, and word of mouth on the movie was pretty good. So I think that there is possibility for a sequel, but according to this, the writer Garland, Andrew Garland, says that it will likely not happen. That was a statement he made in March 2015, just this year. So, which is a shame.
It's such a big universe.
Yeah, it's cool though that at least the film was standalone, and it will probably continue to gain a following. I think.
Yeah.
In sci-fi fan circles.
I give it 10 years. People will be crying for a new film.
Let's talk about is there anything you didn't like about the movie? Any aspects that really kind of rubbed you the wrong way?
I would say that the film even though the world itself was quite large, I felt in the way it was filmed, because it felt like one location the entire time. I mean, obviously not the entire time, but
a good chunk of the movie.
It felt really claustrophobic, and I know that was the point. Because the entire city block ends up going on lockdown. Lockdown is basically like they shut all the entrances and portals, so that way, in case of a nuclear attack, they're more well protected against the radioactive bombardment, and they can have a better chance at survival, ultimately, when there's no way in or out. So that was the point, but I felt very, confined. It's also one of the parts that I like the most, because the judges had to fight their way to the top before they could get out.
Yeah.
Because it forced them to take action, because they couldn't just hold up and wait for backup, because she had an almost unlimited supply of thugs she could throw at them.
Yeah, I kind of like that it is all kind of in one arena of sorts, but I do sort of feel like I was clamoring for a bigger picture of the world at large, which we didn't really get a sense of.
Well, and also, the action sequences, as soon as Dredd decides, okay, they're going to come for us, in force, heavily armed, we have to absolutely fight our way to the top to get out of this place, because it's basically a gigantic bomb shelter. It's designed to protect you from nuclear bombs, so you can imagine there's no way of getting out unless you open the door. As soon as the action starts, it's really cool, because you get Dredd gunning people down left and right, and the way he does it, the way Anderson does it too, because of her psychic abilities. The two of them, they complement each other so well, and they wash over all these untrained street thugs like they're nothing, and it's really, really fun. But I would have enjoyed seeing more outside. Because you know how in every good action film there's I'm splitting hairs here, but in every good action film there's a sequence where you get to see the person being at their best in multiple different situations.
Yeah.
You get to see them evolve and get better and better at what they do. But then again, like we already established, Dredd already has legendary status, which is one of my favorite parts of the film. I really can't think of anything that I disliked too much, except for it just felt confined. I wanted to see him take on the city and not just a city block. That's ultimately what I'm saying. I wanted to see him take on the city.
I guess that's one of the suckiest parts, is that although it's a standalone story, it does beg for a sequel. You know, we really want a sequel. We want to see more. So this is kind of a cool standalone movie, but it does feel like it's just a glimpse of a much bigger picture. So there's a sort of frustration that comes with that. It's not like a negative thing per se.
No, not at all.
It's just sort of it doesn't actually fulfill our desires from the film.
Which is, I think, a great tactic as a storyteller, because you have a beginning, middle, and end in the story. It's a very well done story. You get your resolution at the end, but because they've established the world is in this chaotic state, you know that there's more, and you want to see more, so you want a sequel. So bravo.
So yeah, it's kind of a strange critique, because it's both boo, but also but yeah, well done, yeah, good job. So it's a sort of a weird ambivalence toward what they actually achieved. I think if I had to pick something I didn't like, I almost feel like at times the gore was just a bit too much. It was pretty damn gruesome at times. There's times where it was kind of strangely elegant and beautiful, despite being disgusting and horrific. In some of the slow-mo scenes, you see Bolt go through a guy's face and explodes out the other side, and part of me was like, wow, this is so interesting to kind of see that kind of blood splatter looked at so closely. But then there were a few other times where it just was they didn't really need to show that. When the skinned corpses fall down 200 flights. Although I think that those corpses probably would have been splattered way more than they actually were.
Yeah. This pile of mush.
It would have been just they
would have been everywhere.
A giant. Yeah. They were way too intact for falling 200 stories. Literally 200 stories. But yeah, then you they kind of look under, and you just see a skinned head that's been splattered on the ground. It's just sort of they could have left some of that to the imagination. I didn't need to see everything. But it was interesting to see this film kind of dance that Gore line and try and push the boundaries, but try and do it in sort of an elegant way. It was it's sort of a critique. I guess kind of like you, where I see what they're going for and I kind of respect it, but I also kind of wish it was done a little differently.
It's funny that you say that they danced the line there, because there's one part that I love, but I also wish I knew more about. And that's there's a moment where the guy is like trying to mess with Anderson because she's a seer, and she's in his head, and he's like making her see all these moments where he's like, you know, physically assaulting her in ways that, you know, a person of his particular line of work would assault someone, especially a pretty blonde woman. And she flips the tables on him because it's his mind, but she's the one with the power, and she flips it on him, and then he's all like, oh, you think your mind's messed up? Just wait till you see what I do to you. And then he starts attacking her more. And then you go from inside his head to outside, and then he's like standing there, and she's just looking at him, and he pees himself. And you're like, I wonder what the hell she did to him.
Yeah.
Because they leave that bit to your imagination.
Yeah, that's true.
And he's trying his best to mess with her, right? And she messes with him right back. She even does the thing to him in his mind that Mama does to the guy who assaulted her. And if that doesn't make you piss yourself, it isn't until after that the guy like loses all control of his bowel movements, and then she basically just and then he's done. He becomes docile. Like I'm glad they didn't show that, but at the same time I'm like, my goodness, what did she do?
And I think that is one of the cases where it kind of like it danced the line and succeeded, definitely. Where it's like it probably is for the best for our own mental health.
Yeah.
That we didn't know what she just put him through. Yeah. So, but you can't help but be curious.
Yeah, and he deserved it too. Good for her. She got him good.
Let's take a quick look at some of the cast and crew. Pete Travis. I don't know. Did you see Vantage Point? It seems like the biggest movie that he's done before this. You got a whole line of celebrities in that one. Dennis Quaid and Forrest Whitaker, Zoe Saldana, William Hurt, Sigourney Weaver. It was one where the same thing was happening over and over again. You just saw it from different people's points of view. I heard that it was actually kind of boring, but I haven't seen it, so I can't really have a firm opinion on that one.
No, I haven't seen it.
But since Dredd, it looks like he's only done a few TV movies, but he's got one coming up called City of Tiny Lights that's in post-production right now with Billie Piper, who's known best for her work in Doctor Who. But yeah, I think that Pete Travis, not a huge filmography, but I think that Dredd really showed his directing chops, and I'd like to see more come from him.
He did a really good job of establishing the environment and the world.
And he can direct action well. And you think that that's not a big deal until you see certain action movies that have been directed very poorly. I unfortunately, like the Transformers movies, I find like sometimes
I was just thinking of the Transformers films.
They're just like, it's so shaky. Yeah, okay, all right. I'm sorry. I'm a psychic.
Don't mind mess me up, okay?
Where it's just like all you have to do is make a movie about robots fighting, but don't make it so messy that we don't know what the hell's going on. That's not.
You already won.
Alex Garland wrote the screenplay and helped produce it. He's only recently directed his first feature film, which I did see, called Ex Machina, which was sort of a big film this year in the independent film market, which also actually has Domhnall Gleeson, who was in Dredd. He was the guy whose eyes were pulled out and was the victim of Mamas. Did you see Ex Machina?
No, I didn't.
It's an interesting film. It's very.
I want to.
It's a very intellectual, kind of slow-paced sci-fi film.
I like those ones too.
Yeah. But yeah, very different feel from Dredd, that's for sure. Karl Urban, I think, was a huge highlight of the film. I love that he was humble enough that he hid his face, despite the fact that he's Karl Urban. He's one of the biggest names in the movie, but he stayed true to the character. Yeah. Which is great, and I love how Karl Urban he's willing to kind of disappear into a role. Best known, I guess, at this point as Bones, isn't he?
Who, Bones?
Yeah, from Star Trek.
Oh,
come on! Do I gotta tell you?
I'm just kidding.
Okay. The Doctor from the new Star Trek series.
For those of you who don't know, Bones McCoy is the Doctor on the Enterprise in the 60s Star Trek, who also makes a brief appearance in Star Trek The Next Generation.
That's true, yes.
First episode.
Very brief. Very. They made him look really old.
Yeah, Encounter at Farpoint.
Karl Urban really kind of took a lot of notes from DeForest Kelley's performance and really embodied the Doctor. And also, what a lot of people don't remember is that Karl Urban was also in the Lord of the Rings film. Oh, I don't remember the character's name. One of those... Riders of Rohan? Rohan? Yeah. Ilmer. There you go.
Ilmer, the Horsemaster.
In the Two Towers and Return of the King. I don't think he was in the Fellowship at all. But...
I would cut off your head, dwarf. if it stood a bit higher off the ground. I love that line. And then you get to see that Legolas has a boy crush on him. It's like, you would die before your sword fell. And he whips out his arrow, bow and arrow. And I'm just like, yeah, Legolas.
And Olivia Thirlby. She's cute, man. But she plays Anderson. This is kind of like
She's in Juno?
a bit of a departure role for her. Yeah, she was one of Juno's friends in Juno. Leah. And also No Strings Attached. She was in that one with Natalie Portman.
Still haven't seen that one.
This was kind of like a very comparatively dark and gritty kind of film for her.
Mm-hmm.
Because, yeah, there she is right there, just hanging out with Juno. Looking very much like a teenager.
Holy cow.
But she's my age, so there you go.
She's old.
Thanks.
I'll be 30 this month, so.
Oh yeah, you're hitting the big 3-0.
Yeah.
Good for you.
My goodness.
Oh dear, oh dear.
It's all downhill from 40, you know that, right?
From 40?
Yeah, 40's the new 30, didn't you hear?
Yeah.
Or it is now, okay?
Yeah, basically, we'll
Damn it.
defy the odds.
Technically, I'm 25 in dog years.
And I guess the other cast member I noticed, Lena Heady.
Mama.
She played Mama. She's best known right now. She's from Game of Thrones. Cersei Lannister, the most one.
That is her.
Yeah. So she's very good at playing like monstrous women.
I could not. And she's also in 300.
Well, there she's a good guy, but she's been very powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She has that royal quality to her.
She also,
that's where I recognize her from, because I didn't know.
She also played in the Sarah Connor Chronicles. She played Sarah Connor.
Did she?
Yeah. Oh,
wasn't Summer Glau in that?
Summer Glau was in that, yes. She was a Lady Terminator.
The Lady Nader.
Lady Nader.
She will always be River Tam to me.
And she will to Benny. So, I guess my question, we better wrap this up. Do you recommend this movie, and who would you recommend it to?
Well, this movie clearly isn't for everyone.
No. I definitely I wouldn't recommend it to my mom, that's for sure.
No, and I wouldn't recommend it to little kids.
No, it's a film for grown-ups. So all you kids listening to the Checking the Gate podcast, yeah, you consult your mommies first.
Yeah, I think you get ID'd if you try to buy the movie. Yes, I would recommend this to anyone who is a fan of the action genre and who likes, stylistic cinematography, because it's definitely got its own style. What's great about it is, you know how like the whole Zack Snyder slow motion action sequences, like from
300.
Yeah.
And
well, the slow-mo is actually used mostly in sequences where there's not a lot of action. You notice that? Like I'd say like 80 to 90% of it is just them showing what slow-mo does. Like, for instance, Mama's hand coming out of the water, and you can see all the little droplets, and it's all, like, really intense visuals.
Yeah.
And then there's, like, people falling, and it's all slow-mode. But there's also that one scene where they kick in the door and blow everyone away.
Yeah, that one, like, one of the biggest action sequences of the film is in slow-mo, which is an interesting choice.
But, like, the slow-mo is, like stylistically, it's there to show what this drug does.
Well,
yeah, the guys were taking slow-mo before the judges kicked in the door, that's why.
Yeah, exactly.
So it wasn't really for the action sequence, although it helped the action sequence.
It's nice that the slow-mo stuff, it's part of the story. It's not just...
Yeah, it's like, look how cool we can slow down and then trip somebody and stab him with a spear, which is really cool. I love it in those films. Don't get me wrong. Mm-hmm. But it's this style that he used in the context of the story. It's this drug that slows things down.
I also recommend the film. I think it's a great action film for people who like sci-fi, people who don't mind a relatively simple story that actually has some deeper ideas behind it. It's got a lot to offer, and if you're not squeamish with bloody scenes, then it should be good. Yeah, I think I'd give it a good solid 4 out of 5 stars myself. Anything else you want to say about Judge Dredd? Anything else you want to say about Dredd 2012?
If you have a 3D television and you're going to purchase the film, I would watch it in 3D. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. If not, that's not my problem.
This is one of the rare cases where I'd say, yeah, it actually benefits. It benefits the movie to have that really immersive 3D visual experience.
If anything, for the slow-mo bits. There's actually a part when people are falling that I actually get vertigo for like a split second.
Yeah.
That the 3D helped. I have a fear of heights. Having that visual with like the slow-mo and then the 3D just gave me butterflies. They were in my stomach.
In his tum-tums.
And then I digested them.
They were delicious butterflies.
They were very delicious.
Well, thanks so much for coming back on the show. It's always great chatting.
Thanks for having me. Check out the Sci-Fi Movie Podcast as well.
Please do. And also the Music A to Z podcast, which my brother Steve and I co-pilot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm chatting in front of this microphone all the time now. I'm just blah 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 blah, and I don't even know if anyone's ever listened.
I listen.
Thanks, Paul. That means a lot to me. Sweet. Well, everyone, this is Doug and Paul signing off.
We're signing off.
Thank you so much for listening to the Checking the Gate podcast. We are moving on.